I am actually gonna do this demo by myself today because Annie is unfortunately out sick. So you're gonna have to put up with me being cameraman and demonstrator. So hopefully it goes okay. If you're watching, drop me a comment and let me know you're here and where you're visiting from, or where you're watching from. Visiting from, I don't know where that came from. Let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello. And today I'm gonna demonstrate charm bracelets, and we're gonna be using some of the impression dies from our current impression die spotlight that we have on the site right now, which is like a winter themed spotlight. So we have some fun bears and a really cute little fox, and some kind of like star snowflake shapes and things like that. Good morning, thanks for saying hi. Watching from your living room. That's nice. That sounds cozier than in here. It's a little bit chilly in here, but since Annie's not here, I could turn the heat up. Annie runs warmer than me, so she's always hot. So I don't turn the heat on when Annie's around. But she's not here today because she's not feeling well. So I'm blasting the heat. All right. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna go ahead and show you some of the samples that Annie and I made first. So let me flip my camera around. Okay. So Annie made this amazing sample. I'll show you hers first. And actually first you need to see the bracelet itself. She made this bracelet using one of our ring impression dies that we have available right now in our winter spotlight. So these dies are all available. I should have checked the expiration date. They're available for a couple more days, but definitely check them out because they are expiring soon. But she used a ring impression die, and what she did is she ground out the end of the die just with a burr. So you could use something like this or a ball burr. And Annie, I'm actually just making huge assumptions here. I wasn't sure you were gonna be commenting or not. So if I'm wrong, please correct me. But she ground out the end of this impression die using a burr so that she could basically make it a progressive die. So she could put some wire and press it and then move it up and press as long of a piece as she needed. So that's really cool. So she was able to make her own patterned wire with the ring impression die, which is really fun. And so she got this beautiful bangle. Yeah, Annie's out sick today. We have some nasty plague working its way through the shop. There's only a couple of us left standing. I'm a little worried because I haven't gotten it yet. I feel like my time is coming. But then check out these charms that she made. So she has these really fun little tube-like charms that she made also with that ring impression die. It might have been a different ring impression die. Not sure. It looks like the same one. And then instead of soldering the bangle shut, she used jump rings at the end, which is just kind of something, you know, out of the ordinary, gives it a little bit of extra flair, makes it a little more fun. And then she has her tube beads kind of separate these more traditional style charms that she's made with impression die stampings. So this one is my favorite in the spotlight up right now. It's really pretty. And so if you check out each of the connections she has on each of these, they're all a little different, which is really fun. I'm sorry, I'm trying to hold my camera but I'm really shaky for some reason. So this charm has just a, oh my gosh, a pretty traditional jump ring, you know, connected with a jump ring attachment. This one is really fun. She has this like tubing style bead. She's flared the ends to give it a little extra pizzazz. And there's some jump ring attachments, and then this really sweet little bear impression die stamping from our shop plate that's available right now. It has a few different bear designs on it. This one is fun. She did more of like, she just soldered a straight wire out of this little bear head and then did sort of like a wrapped connection. I really like that one. It's just a little more interesting than just a traditional jump ring. This one is kind of the same style that I did for my sample. I'll show you in a minute. Just like a jump ring soldered kind of perpendicular to the charm itself, so it just slides right on. And I love these tube beads. I think they're so fun. I really like this one too. Look how pretty that is. And then this charm, she soldered a little tube bead instead of a jump ring to the impression and then fed a jump ring through that. So lots of different options on here. This is really fun. And Annie said, I don't know if you saw in the comments, but she said that the jump rings make it so you can swap out the charms or take some off and add some, so that's really fun too. And then she actually has one other charm that's not on the bracelet that I wanted to show you guys too. She made this one, and this is using our new pattern plate that we released, also with this winter spotlight. So I'll show you that. This is the pattern plate. This is the pattern plate itself, and then this is copper that's been rolled with the pattern plate. And we took a picture of like frost, and we turned it into a pattern plate. So it's like ice crystals. It's really fun. So that's a really fun pattern plate. I haven't made anything with it yet, but I really like it. I just need to think of the perfect thing to make with it. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry for my sniffles. All right, so you saw Annie's bangle that she made with the ring impression die. I have a couple bangles here. I want you guys to think about different materials or like shapes of wire and things you can make your bangles with. So it doesn't just have to be round wire. You could use sheet or you could use flat wire. This, I think, was flat wire, pretty sure. And it has a hammer texture all the way around. This one was a round wire, but I used like a cross peen kind of face hammer to put this heavy hammer texture, and it sort of flattens that top edge. This was square wire, also with a hammer texture on the sides and the top. And then this is round wire, but instead of just leaving it, you know, shiny round wire, I hammered the whole thing. And then, so I hammered it as like a straight flat, you know, or a straight round wire. And then like I just rotated it, hammered it, hammer textured the whole wire, and then made a bracelet out of it. If you hammer after forming your bracelet, it will stretch the material and you will end up with a bigger bracelet than you intended. And we'll talk about sizing here in just a second. I'm almost done showing samples. So this is my very simple sample. It looks kind of sad next to Annie's really fun sample. Really minimal, just a very clean, shiny, polished heavy silver bangle. This is solid, heavy gauge wire, and that little, I don't remember what we called this impression die. It's like a little North Star charm or something. It's really cute. So you could take it, you know, you could have the more artsy, more fun route, or you could go simple, modern, clean. Here's a little set of bangles I made a little while ago with square wire. So your bangles don't have to be round. They just need to be able to fit over somebody's hand. So think about different shapes you can make them. They don't have to be circular. This is just scored and bent square wire. And then I used the charm to connect the two bangles so they stay together. And then you can also, if you don't want the charms to completely slide around on the bangle all the time, you can solder little connections for them. So on this one, I have little tube beads, which I'll show you. They're actually crimps. Soldered at specific points, and then I have little impression stampings and little beads. Okay, thanks, Patty. Compass Rose charm. So yeah, if you like a little less movement, a little more control, you could do something like this. So those tube beads are actually crimps. These are 3 by 2.6 millimeter. But Rio has lots of sizes, and you know, obviously there are other suppliers besides Rio. You could check Halstead or probably Auto Fry, Stoller, you know, the regular places. Okay, so, oh, and these aren't made into charms yet, but I really like this little shot plate too. I posted a little pendant kind of charm thing I made with this one yesterday. Of course, I'm silly and I forgot to bring it with me, so it's at home, but you can see it in the Potter group. It's just this with a little 3 millimeter CZ set in the center. So the shot plate comes with 2 sizes. It would be a really cute like earring and pendant set. All right, so the first thing I want to go through with you guys is how to size for a bracelet. I uploaded this handout to the files section of Potter People. And I'll also make sure I upload it to the event page on Facebook. But this has instructions for how to get the correct size for a bracelet. Let me put my phone in this little holder here, and then I can have both of my hands. Can you guys, how's the audio? Can you hear me okay? Okay, so if you have time, go download this handout. So there's a few ways you can do this. If you have a known bangle size that fits you well, you can check out the last page of this handout. And it has the formulas that you can use to kind of reverse engineer how long of a piece of material you would need. I don't usually size that way, like I don't start with a bangle that fits me, but you could do it that way. And there are like, if you've seen this tool, this little ring sizer, they do sell bracelet sizers that are similar. They're just a lot bigger for bangles. And so you could do it and do it with the math that way. I tend to like to size bangles the same way I would size a ring for someone because everybody's hand is a different size. And let me back this up a little bit. Sorry, I'm by myself, so I don't have a cameraman today. So the bangle needs to fit over the widest part of your hand. So when your hand is like closed down like this area around the knuckles tends to be the widest part, and the bracelet has to fit over that part in order to fit as a bangle. So the way I like to do it is outlined on these instructions, but I will measure that widest area of the hand. And I do that just by cutting a strip of paper and wrapping it around my hand at the widest area, and then making a mark on the paper, which I've already done here. So I have my length measured out. It was 8¼ inches. And then we also need to know what the thickness of our material is, because that is going to affect the length of material that we need. Because the thicker the material that you're making the bracelet out of, the more like allowance you need for that, because it takes up space when you form a circle, the thickness. So the formula is on here, on this handout, but what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the thickness of this material and multiply it, I generally do by 2 or 3, and then add that to this length that you measured. So this material, this is 8-gauge wire. And there are charts on Rio's website and things that tell you, if you don't know, how thick 8-gauge wire is in millimeters. There are charts that you can find. You can also use a digital caliper to measure it yourself. If you don't have a digital caliper, they're super handy. You should have one. Okay, so 8-gauge round wire is 3.3 millimeters thick. So I'm gonna do 3.3 times 2, which is 6.6, and I'm gonna add that to the length of my paper, which I told you was 8¼ inches, but you have to make sure when you're doing these formulas that you're using the same unit of measure. So I needed to convert inches to millimeters. It's really nice if you have a ruler that has both, because then you don't have to convert. You can just look. So I have, this length was 8.25 inches, but if I put it on the bottom of the ruler here with the millimeters, I can see, okay, it's like 21.5 centimeters basically. Sorry, you can't see that, I can. And so that's 210.5 millimeters essentially. Okay, I hope I'm not losing anyone with the math. It's all on the handout. It's really not that hard once you just look at the paper and kind of write down the numbers. So I have the thickness of my material times 2, which is this 6.6 number, plus the overall length, which was about 210 millimeters. And so my total length of material that I need to make the correct size bangle is 216.6 millimeters. And if I want that in centimeters, it's 21.6 centimeters. Okay, so I just need to measure that long of a piece on my wire and cut it. And I'm gonna cut it with my saw. You don't wanna cut with like wire cutters or anything, because it pinches the end and you don't get a flat end. And you need the ends flat for soldering. So what did we say? 21.6 centimeters. So roughly that long. I'm a little off camera here. I'm just making a mark at the end, and then I'll move into where you can see. So I made a Sharpie mark where I need to cut it. And then I'm going to use my saw to cut. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the comments. I am trying to pay attention to those, and it looks like Annie is helping out from her sick bed. Annie, if you were here, you would be dying. I turned the heat up to 72. Okay, So I've cut that with my saw. It's not perfect. So I need my ends to be completely flat. Let me draw this for you. Because what we're doing is we need to bring those ends together for soldering. We're not worried about making the bracelet round right now. We do not care about the shape of it. We just care about bringing those ends together. And so what can happen if we're not careful or if our ends aren't flat, and if we're too focused on getting it round, we can end up with something like this. This is going to make for a very poor solder joint. If you're even able to get this soldered, it's going to be very weak because there's such a small area of connection. So it might pop open when you're forming it round, or it might break later when the person's wearing it. It's not a good solder joint. Also, you're going to have a very visible solder seam because look how wide this area is at the top. So I try to actually bring my ends straight across so we can get like a really good, this is called a butt seam, when you're butting two ends right up against each other. My drawing skills are lacking, but you get the idea. So I don't care if this is round. I'm gonna fix that after soldering. We're not worried about the shape. We wanna bring those ends together completely flat so we can get a very nice, strong, clean solder seam here. Okay, so we're gonna file the ends. All right, that looks okay. I'm gonna do the other end. Yep, if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat. It's nice to hear from you too. It makes me feel like I'm not sitting in a room by myself talking to myself for an hour. Because, you know, that's actually what's happening here. Okay, so my ends are flat-ish. They'll probably still need some work. But what I'm gonna do is just with my hands, I'm just gonna bend. And if you can't bend it with your hands, you can use like a nylon or a rawhide mallet. I keep saying this. I know I'm probably beating the point to death, but don't worry about the shape. And then you want some tension on the seam. So I'm kind of pushing those ends past each other. Just like you would if you were making a ring or a bezel, or, you know, these skills are applicable to lots of other areas. All right, so I don't know how well you can see that. Oh, do I have a favorite brand of file? I actually do, and everyone's different, but this is my favorite brand. Rio sells these. I'm sure the other jewelry suppliers do. I was not picky about files until I started using this brand, and then I realized that I really loved these files. So I like these. Annie can chime in with what she likes. I know she likes a different brand. But this is the same brand. It's just a flat file, and it's a coarser. This is a 0 cut. Actually, it might be a different brand. They're both Swiss. But this is a number 0, so it's just a coarser cut than my needle files. My needle files are a number 2. And then I also use a number 2 half round. Those are like my main files. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see like close up. I know it's not super hyper focused, but I actually have a pretty good seam here, but it's not perfect. It would solder okay, but I like to take it just a little step further to get like a really nice tight fit. So the way I do that is I'll put it on the bench pin here. I moved it a little bit. Let me get it back aligned. And then I'm gonna take my saw and I'm gonna saw through that seam. And if you were to look at a jeweler's saw blade under a microscope, you would see that the teeth, they do not stick straight out from the blade. They actually are slightly offset. So they're kind of like this. And so you can use the saw blade basically like a tiny file. And if you saw through this seam, it'll basically file both sides of your seam at the same time so that you can get a perfect fit. So I'm gonna push this back to the back of my bench pin. Let me move the camera a little closer so you can see better again. Let me get some Burr Life. So just real slow, bringing my blade through that seam. And it's just removing any high points. So now these two ends can come together perfectly. There's a little burr on this end. All right, so that is pretty nearly perfect. So now I'm ready to solder it. So I'll take you over to the soldering station and I'll show you how I solder this. And I think while we're there, we will also solder the jump ring on my little charm. And then I'll show you how to form this round, and then I'll show you how to solder the charm onto the bangle. All right, I've got to move the camera, take you guys over to the soldering station without dropping all my stuff. Okay. Give me a second to get set up here. All right, we're gonna pause on the bracelet and do this charm first. Oh no, I dropped my jump ring. Oh, here it is. Okay, so this is one of the impression dies that's available in the spotlight right now. We've talked about it. I filed a small flat spot on the top of one of the like star points, and that's where I'm gonna attach my jump ring. Sorry, pausing to put my hair up. Sorry. I also filed a small flat spot, it's probably too small for you to see, on the top of this open jump ring that I'm gonna line up with the flat spot on this charm so that I can get a nice strong solder joint. You know, if you think about a circle joining with the tip of a star, that's just a very weak intersection. Like there's just not a lot of surface area holding those two things together. I'm gonna try to set this up so you can see it okay. I don't know. The focus isn't great. The lighting's not great in this corner, but this is the best I think I can do. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flow solder onto that flat spot of my jump ring first, and then I'm just gonna hold it and heat the little star, and the solder will flow from the jump ring to the star. My hands are kind of shaky this morning, so hopefully that works okay. I'm gonna change the angle of this just a little bit. Should have left it. Okay. Just adding a little bit of flux to my parts here. I already have some solder chips cut. I'm gonna light my torch. Try not to hit the camera. Okay, so here's a little solder chip. I am going to ball it up and then make sure I know where that flat spot on my jump ring is. I know you can't see it. You'll just have to believe me. Making sure that area is fluxed, then I'm gonna pick up that little ball of solder. Oops, sorry, I think I was out of the camera. I know it's kind of blurry though. I'm gonna flow the solder. You guys can't see what I'm doing. Annie, I miss you. Oh no, I lost my solder chip. There it is. Okay, hold on, let me look at the camera. Okay. If I move it, I think you're just gonna have to use your imagination for a minute. All right, I'm flowing. Okay, the solder flowed to the jump ring. Now I'm going to hold it. Where I need to on the seam of that star. It's just really dirty. Okay, heat the star up. There's like some gunk stuck to my jump ring. I'm wondering if I'm gonna have to pickle it really quick. But I'm gonna try to get away with not. Okay. Sorry, guys. If you need to set up 2 third hands, you can absolutely do that. All right, so my little jump ring soldered to my charm. I'm sorry, that was hard to see. We'll move that out of the way, and then I'll solder the bracelet. You should be able to see that a little better because it's not so tiny. Let me move the camera a little more above. That might help. All right, so this moved a little bit. Move it back into position. And then again, I'm gonna flux the seam. Remember, flux absorbs oxides while you're heating. And when your metal is dirty or oxidized, the solder does not want to flow. Solder prefers, or needs, is a better word, clean metal. So if you want to get good solder seams, you need to keep your metal clean, and flux is what does that. All right, and I didn't mention, but I'm using hard solder. I tend to use hard solder whenever possible. Just catching up on the comments a little bit. Oh, Michael, hi. So fun. Okay, so this is gonna require more heat because it's a pretty heavy, 8 gauge, it's pretty substantial. I'm gonna start warming this up. The flux is gonna do its bubbly thing. I usually wait until the flux has mellowed out and gone clear and glassy before I add my solder, but if you're not comfortable working with both hands with the torch, you can always add your solder before you start heating. It just tends to move around. You really do need to get comfortable using both hands. Now see, the flux is doing its job. My metal all around has oxidized, but the area I'm soldering has not, and that's because of the flux. So now I'm going to grab my little solder chips, and I like to ball them up. I feel like I just get a cleaner joint that way. I think I lost one. So I've got 2 little chips on here, if I can get this one off the tip of my tweezer. And then I'm gonna heat the bracelet evenly. Remember, we're bringing the whole bracelet, or at least this general area, up to the temperature that the solder flows at. We're not just trying to melt the solder. If you just heat right here, you'll melt the solder, it'll ball up, and it'll sit in this stubborn little ball on the surface, and it won't flow until this comes to temperature. So we need to evenly heat, bring the whole piece up to temperature in order for the solder to flow cleanly and actually join our 2 pieces. And if you heat one side more than the other, the solder will just flow to one side. That can also happen if you don't have a good tight seam. Solder does not like to bridge gaps. Okay, my solder is flowing, just making sure it's flowing completely, and it flowed in my seam, so I'm good. Okay, let me see if I can check up on some of these comments. It looks like Annie's keeping up with you guys, so I'm gonna throw this in the pickle. We'll pickle the charm and the bracelet for a minute, and then I'll show you how to form the bracelet and add the charm. So I've got my pickle pot over here. Thanks for joining, everybody. You are holding your breath. I know, it's hard not to hold your breath when you solder. And while this is pickling, I will just put in a plug for the demo we have planned next week. Next week, Annie and I, barring any additional plague, we'll be teaching you guys how to make little shadow box pendants, and we will have a new impression die spotlight out that we are pretty excited about for that demo. So stay tuned. The demo will be next Wednesday. We will announce the time. It'll be probably 10 or 11, but we'll create an event and everything just like we did for this one. So keep your eyes peeled. All right, let's take a look at this bracelet. So we're just making sure the solder went all the way around. It did. Sorry, focus. I have a little bit of cleanup to do, but that is normal. Oops. Sorry. Okay. And we'll take out our charm, rinse it off. So we got a nice connection there. It's still a little dirty. I'll leave it in the pickle a little bit longer. But the solder looks good, and it's an open ring, so we'll solder it closed after we form the bracelet, but we'll leave it in the pickle to clean a bit longer while we're forming the bracelet. And you just want to make sure that any metal that comes into contact with your steel tools has been rinsed and thoroughly dried. We're going to take this over to the anvil to form it, and we don't want to leave rust on our anvil. So, okay, doing everything one-handed. All right, we're gonna come over here to the anvil. You can use, if you have a bracelet mandrel, you can use that. Or I'm gonna use the horn of the anvil, so I will show you that way. So we just have this like shop anvil. This is way more than is necessary. If you don't have anything, I would recommend looking into bracelet mandrels. They're very affordable. So I'm gonna hook you up in my little phone holder here. Okay, and then I'm using a nylon hammer. This is available from Rio. I'm sure other suppliers have them as well. I prefer nylon to rawhide, but that's just a personal preference. So use, what you have or what you prefer. You don't want to use a metal hammer because if you do, one, it's going to leave hammer marks, and two, it's going to stretch your bangle. So if you do want a hammered look bangle, you either need to hammer the metal first before you measure and cut your bangle length, or you need to size way down and hammer until it's stretched enough to be the correct size. So we're just gonna put this on the horn of the anvil. Let me open it up a little bit. Hold on. And we're just gonna hammer in the same spot while we slowly rotate this bangle around, and it will eventually become perfectly round. Now, one thing that I'm not taking the time to do that I normally would if I wasn't in the middle of like a demonstration is I would actually clean up this solder seam before I come over and form. And the reason for that is you don't want to be beating excess solder down into the surface of your silver. I'm going to skip it just for the sake of time right now, but I would absolutely recommend cleaning up this solder seam with files and sandpaper before you come over here to form. And also, I'm not able to see the comments at this exact moment, so hopefully Annie's able to answer your questions. So I'm not taking the hammer and like following the bracelet around like this. I'm hitting in the exact same spot every time and slowly rotating the bracelet. Okay, so that was about one pass, and you can already see how much rounder we are. It's not perfect, it still needs some work. And sometimes you can see it's not perfectly flat. So we'll need to come to the flat surface of the anvil and flatten it out. I'll show you that in a minute. But we'll get it a little more round first. Okay, so that's pretty good. We'll make sure it's sitting flat. So let me adjust the camera a little bit here. Okay, so now I'm round and straight and ready to add my little charm. So we'll go back over to the soldering station and get the charm shot soldered on, and then I'll open it up for further questions. How are you guys doing? Keeping up with me? All right, let me pull the charm out of the pickle pot. 1 second. And after I finish this part of the demo, we'll go back over to the samples and I'll ask for questions. I'm gonna grab a plier so that I can open up this jump ring. When you open and close jump rings, you always want to do it side to side so that you don't lose the roundness. And I have to open it pretty far to get it over this material. Hopefully it's big enough. I didn't actually pay attention to my jump ring size. It looks like I soldered too small of a jump ring for this bangle on here. Of course I did. Okay, hold on. I have a smaller bangle. Make sure you pay attention to things like that. All right, so we'll solder it onto this bangle. All right, so I have my ends together nicely there. Trying to figure out the best way for you to be able to see what's happening. Let's see here. Sorry, it's a little wonky, so I'm just fixing it. Pardon me while I futz with the jump ring. All right, so I think I'm actually gonna just set it up like this. What I want to be most careful of is that the bangle isn't in you can't see. Okay, hold on. Let me make sure you can see what I'm doing. I want to make sure that the bangle is not in contact with the solder seam. I know the view is not great. I'm sorry. So this bangle is not touching that join. It's it's down at the bottom of the jump ring, so there's space. Because if this bangle is touching where I'm about to solder, then the bangle will solder to the jump ring, and that's not what we want. We want a movable charm, right? This might have already come up in the comments, I'm not sure, but you can also have a closed ring on your charm and feed the charm on to the bangle before you solder the bangle closed. You don't have to do it in this order. And you can still hammer and form the bangle round with the charm sliding around on it. You just have to be a little more careful, you know, not to bang up the charm. All right, so I'm gonna flux that area. And I just need a tiny little chip of solder, and I'm still gonna use hard. You could change to medium if that makes you more comfortable. I tend to use almost exclusively hard. I'm gonna cut an extra piece just in case I need it. Light my torch. And I could also change to a smaller torch tip. That would help make sure I'm not, you know, reheating the solder seam where the jump ring joins to the charm. But I'm just gonna be really careful with where I direct my heat, and I shouldn't have to worry about it too much. So I'm gonna ball up these little pieces of solder, and then heat my ring. And the tweezer is actually acting in my favor too. It's holding the charm, which means it's acting as a heat sink. So this seam between the little star and the jump ring shouldn't open up because the tweezers are drawing out some of the heat. So I'm really just focusing on the jump ring. And hopefully you can see that the solder flowed and I'm good to pickle. So we'll pickle that, and then we'll go look at the samples again and see if anybody has any questions. I'll pull that out of the pickle too so you can see it. 1 second. Okay, so now I have a soldered ring with probably minimal solder cleanup on a bangle. Ta-da! All right, so let's go over to the sample table, and you guys, like Annie said, can chime in with any questions. And yeah, tell us if you've bought any of the impression dies from the Spotlight yet, or if you're planning to, if there's any that you love. Okay, so here's the bangle that we soldered. I still need to clean up my solder seam, but now I have this nice heavy bangle that that's just some flux that needs to be pickled off, that I can add some charms to. Here's the one we just soldered. And then here's Annie's awesome sample again. Okay, hold on. Let me put the camera in the holder, and then I can focus on just showing you things. So again, she has these really fun tube beads that she made just with sections from this ring impression die. And then here's a charm like the one we just made. Here's kind of a flared tube charm. I think this one might be my favorite. I just like that connection. It's just different. I really like these impression dies. I think they're just really clean, minimal, sweet. They have a nice weight if you press them solid. Again, it comes in 2 sizes on the shot plate, so it makes for a really sweet pendant earring set. And this bear shot plate is fun too if you're into bears. So there's Annie's bangle. Here's kind of a more minimalist example. And that's like the one we just did, except I actually paid attention and soldered a correctly sized jump ring on the charm. Excuse me. And remember, bangles don't have to be round, so think about other fun shapes you can make them. Change up your wire. It doesn't have to be round wire. You can use half round, triangle, square, pattern wire, ring impression dies, whatever you want. And if you don't like your charms to completely move around, you can also tack them where you want them. So one more thing about the handout, and if you didn't catch this at the beginning, there's a handout in the files section of the group. So we talked about sizing on the first page. The second page is notes on all the things we just did in the demo for, I have cuff and bangle notes in here just because I thought it would be helpful. But forming the bangle for soldering, and then also the steps for getting it soldered. I have these, I just pulled off the internet, but approximate standard lengths if that's something you're looking for. And then also this last page has, sorry, you're seeing some of my Sharpie through the back, but it has the formulas. My formatting got weird right here. I didn't notice when I printed it. I will fix that and update the file in the group, but it's not that big of a deal. This circle divider comes from Tim McCrate's book, The Complete Metalsmith, which if you're learning to make jewelry, even if you're advanced, this is a stellar book. You will learn so much from it. This circle divider is really handy if you want to do something like this, where you have, you know, evenly spaced out sections. So you would, if you wanted 6 sections, you would make a mark at all the number 6s around this template. If you wanted, you know, 3 sections, you would mark at all the 3s, and that's how that works. It's very handy. It's a great book. Check it out. So make sure you check out the handouts, and I didn't see if there were any questions. Let me look back in the comments really quick. Ugh. I've seen better days, you guys. Oh, I know, I did start coughing last night. Hopefully it's all in my head. All right, I don't see questions, so that's great. Hopefully you guys learned something new. I would love to see if you make a bracelet. If you do, please share it in our group. It makes us happy, and it makes us feel like our job is meaningful. So if you make something, please share, let other people see your beautiful creations, and meet us back here next week for shadow box pendants. We have some fun things planned for you. So see you guys later. Bye.